Welcome to the Career Tipper Podcast, hosted by professional development author and coach Michelle Beatty. The Career Tipper Podcast shares career advancement tips and resources for a variety of industries to assist professionals to keep their soft and technical skills recharged, competitive, and hire ready.
Welcome back to Season 2 of Skills Recharged. The conversation continues with staffing and recruiting expert Tim Lesnick during Episode 4. Tim has over 16 years of experience in the staffing business and has interviewed well over 10,000 applicants, and he has placed nearly 4,000 candidates on a contract or full-time basis. During this episode, Tim is going to share how his career persevered to have longevity through 2 recessions and accomplish his personal and professional goals by networking with a purpose. I'm your host, Michelle Beatty, professional development advocate. Tim, welcome to the Career Tipper Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, Tim, let me know, and please share with the listeners, what led you to having a career in staffing and recruiting? Yeah,
so I've been in the business since, or really the industry, I'd like to say, since 2002, really the tail end of 2002. So, like you said, I've come in the 16 or 17 year time frame. It was totally by accident. I knew nothing about staffing. I mean, I obviously understood what recruiting is, and I think there's a lot of, miscues on, what staffing is as a business, what, you call consulting firms, what recruiting means in terms of its function within HR. So there's a lot of different semantics and misunderstandings that are out there. We can clear some of those up, but probably don't have enough time for all of them. But, in short, the staffing industry is the business in which folks are charging fees to place people in jobs, either on a contract or full-time basis. And the full-time basis is typically referred to as headhunting. And, you could use the word consulting, contracting, or even temp or temporary services, temporary placement services for the whole host of contract sort of placement services that are out there. I know it's a little redundant, but I had no inclination or idea of what the industry was about. Just put my resume online back in 2002. I was only 2.5, 3 years out of Boston College at the time, and had worked in a technology company. I was number 2 in their sales team. I was really excited, very ambitious at the time. And they kind of changed things on me where they decided they wouldn't pay commissions unless our product shipped. And it was a very detrimental time. And I was like, I don't even know what this is about. I wasn't in a financial standpoint where I could wait for my commissions to come in. And so I put my resume online and I got a call from a multi-billion-dollar company, never even heard of, knew nothing about, but apparently they were the creme de la creme in the industry, and got my career started with them. It was a 4 to 5 round interview process that really pushed me to the brink in terms of them trying to figure out how I communicate, how I handle things. They were evaluating whether or not I was wearing different suits to the interviews, paying attention to the time in which I showed up, my mannerisms. It was a very interesting and somewhat psychological, process. And so, in falling into it, I'll do it for the rest of my career. The rest of my working days will be focused on that. So, I was pretty much hooked in the first 3 days of the business and have been passionate and energetic about its process and talking about it ever since.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Now, what is your definition of networking? Because you've had to master that being in the staffing and recruiting industry. So, and I know that you do very well at networking. So what is your definition of networking?
Yeah, I think so. Networking, to answer the question first, and to me, it's just a process of building professional, or dare I even say social contacts. They don't always have to be for your own individual gain on a professional level or a financial level. You could want to network to find the best realtor in town and and use a system for that. So to me, it's simply a process, a social process in that it requires you to get up and go out and meet folks face to face over various events and activities that would otherwise be deemed a professional manner. Typically you're dressed in accordingly as well, but not always the case, because nowadays there is a big surge in the meetup crowd where, even social events where you're going out and meeting strangers for the first time have elements of networking in them. And, to your point, the tie-in is networking is an essential function of the career path I've chose. I think being in sales and recruiting in general, those fields require you to go out and meet people, meet strangers for the first time. And people can kind of smell, for lack of a better word, or even taste or feel a salesperson in the old school, what's the word I'm looking for? The old school sort of notorious words for salespeople and stuff. There's always kind of this bad inclination around it. And so you don't want it to always be forced. And so networking has become increasingly more popular because it is a way to go out and just build contacts and build relationships. And by doing so in a meaningful way, then your business or your contact sphere should grow in a meaningful way. There's this whole mantra, it's a cliche, it's been said many times, many ways, that, people do business with people they trust. People do business with people they like. Well, the recruiting activity and the sales activity requires you to have this outbound reach to people, picking up a phone or sending an email or doing a social media post. And, it has its degree of, knocking people off guard. And not always people always feel that's a positive thing because they might not be asking for it. Right. So, if you're going out for a social event, usually that social event has a direction and a topic and a theme behind it. And so people are already out going to share and express their interest in that particular topic, albeit a seminar or, something else to learn and grow with. And so you can connect and figure out a way to really, you're not figuring anything out. You're just being yourself, being friendly, going out and meeting strangers for the first time. And hopefully that know, like, and trust thing is built from those interactions. And, beyond that, you're building your network of resources, a group of people that you can call upon if you need help, expertise, or advice, given any certain path. And so to me, over time, this is an activity that goes up the chain. The very wealthy network and mastermind and have their group that they go to, and they stay within that group. And, I feel like if you want to become very successful, you should mimic what other people do that are very successful. So that is, they try to build their sphere of influence of professional contacts over various different industries and disciplines, so that they can tap into that person's sphere of influence. I read in the past about one of these master networkers. I think this guy is in the Guinness Book of World Records for selling the most cars. And he had a couple rules. One was, always send somebody a card on their birthday. And then the other one was to live by that just about every person that's out there professionally knows about 250 to 300 contacts that know, like, and trust them in some capacity. And so by tapping into 10 people, you're tapping into their network. Ultimately, by reaching out to 10 and them knowing, liking, and trusting you, you now have built not a network of just 10, you've exponentially built a network of 2,500, which is to tap into, their sphere of influence. So in sheer volume and numbers, when you're trying to achieve results through people, the more people the better off you're going to be.
This is true. Now, what is your advice to someone that's an introvert and they've been working they're not new to the workforce, but they've been working, they want to change, and they're not comfortable with stepping out, or they know, yes, I know I need a network, but for some reason there's a hindrance. What is some advice that you have for that particular professional?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to answer this in a backward sort of way. I like to go back in time. I am not at all shy, right? And I'm not shy about talking about what I do and the things that interest me. In fact, I am overly talkative as a person. With those people that know me, if we kept record on this, they're probably going to have to delete it and cut me off, right? So, but that wasn't always the case. I go back to fifth grade or certain times when I was if I was into a book and I had to do a book report in front of the class and I loved it and I really put the time into it, I killed it in those presentations. But, there were times in my life when I had to go present in front of a group. I know you're not asking me about public speaking, but I promise this relates, is that, the lack of confidence in people calling themselves an introvert, which isn't even really the right word. An introvert is someone that gets their energy internally. They need to recharge by being alone in their own space, whereas extroverts get their energy from others. They come alive around other people. So it doesn't necessarily, mean that this is a weakness. This is what's required to be successful in this area is to practice, just like anything you're not good at, and not use that cliche, practice makes perfect. I think maybe perfect practice makes perfect, or doing that perfect, any kind of practice builds confidence is what I'm trying to say. Right. And so once you become more confident doing something, then it's going to be more natural and it's going to be easy. And so if you didn't read the book and you're standing in front of your whole class trying to, ad lib a book report, you're going to be, embarrassed. You're going to be red in the face. You're not going to know what to say. You're going to have a total lack of confidence, and it's going to be an awful experience. So I tell folks, don't go out there and force yourself to do things that you really don't like to do. You have to reframe it. If you're trying to get a job and you're trying to build your career, and you need to work on your weaknesses, right? So I'm not sure what people's fear might be related to that. If it's that, hey, I guess it is really daunting walking into a room where no one. Right. And nowadays it's even worse than when I started, because nowadays people can bury their faces in their phones and be completely awkward in those meetings. And you could actually go to a meeting, not talk to one person, get the content, stare on your phone, eat by yourself. And believe it or not, as much as I've networked, I've done that sometimes. I just haven't been in the mood, and I've kind of shelled in and didn't feel that social. And at the end of the day, I felt like I completely wasted my time and let myself down. So I can empathize, trust me. Because I've been to thousands of these doesn't mean I haven't done that myself. So I think your question is related to what I recommend. The first thing I recommend is to go with a buddy or go with a friend, but don't create a clique with that friend or a couple of buddies. And try to have mixed company, a couple different professions, a couple people of different age groups, a couple men, couple women, mix it up, try to be diverse in who you choose. Don't just go with your very best friend that does exactly what you do, because then you guys are going to sit there and chat with each other the whole time potentially. And really you're just cannibalizing each other, for lack of a better word, right? I used to say this when I would go with my business partners in the staffing industry. I would be like, okay, guys, see you later. And they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, don't go and sit at a table with your whole team and talk to your team all the time. You're not paying $250 for a charity dinner or $50 for this event or going to a free meetup group just to be seen in a group and chat about the same things you would chat about in any other office. So for me, I always tell people I'm going with, let's split up. And then we, for comfort, you meet up maybe 15 minutes in. Hey, and then it's easier for you to introduce your friend to that person, even if you didn't catch the person's name or remember it. Say, hey, this is my friend Joe. What was your name again? And what is it you do? And then there's already a warm introduction there. So, I think it's a very long way of saying use the buddy system. But there's a lot of other tactics too. The first thing I have people do is try to find a group out there that meets their needs, meets some passion, right? And so the next question that I often get or thought is, well, there's not a lot of things out there that I see that interest me. This is related to IT, this is related to HR, or this group is loaded with salespeople. And if I go, I feel like I'm going to get bombarded with a bunch of salespeople asking me things. And, beyond what I focus on, or being a new grad from school, the whole point of the seminar you and I did was to help new grads and college students that may not really know what their interests are. They know some of the things they're interested in, but they don't, apply necessarily in the professional environment. And so what I learned was like, hey, if what you see out there, if you don't like what you're finding out there, then make one yourself, right? And so that evolution has grown exponentially during the last decade. Again, I think about how times were in the beginning, and the idea of starting your own networking group 15 or 16 years ago when I first started doing this stuff would have been completely daunting, even for a socialite like me. However, and it might be very difficult for a college student too, but meetup.com, there is a meetup almost on every single topic that's out there, and it's very easy for you to create your own. So, based on the scenario that, you and I experienced, which thank you for reminding me about that. I feel like I forget about it. It was 7 or 8 years ago, and it turned out to be really probably the best networking initiative I've ever been a part of, me personally, because I helped build a group with a client, and we engaged a lot of students and helped them get off the ground, and we were providing a lot of value. The group stayed small and intimate, but we probably grew it to as much as 30 to maybe even 50 people going to an event, when at first there was only 3 or 4 people in the room. And the trick was we still had the same excellent content because of that thing I told you 2 questions ago, which is my mind is, even if 4 people in the room, I'm going to blow those 4 people away. And those 4 people know 250 people each, and they might share with their friends. And inevitably, that's how it grew and how it happened. So our group went from 4 to like 6 the next month, and then it was 10, and, it grew from there. And, we ended up dissolving it based on some, really not dissolving it, just kicking it over to somebody else. And I think the group is even still out there. I don't know how well it's doing, but after, 3 or 4 years, it becomes quite a lot of work to do that. And it had served its purpose for me, which was to build it, turn it over to others, and really reap the rewards of it. So if you're not seeing what you are passionate about out there, something you're interested in learning about, create it. And believe it or not, you might be like, well, what's my content going to be? How am I going to build it? You can simply put it on any social media site or start asking some friends. And before you know it, guest speakers pop up all over the place. And, people like myself or others might be willing to, with a level of expertise, saying, hey, I want to do a job hunting seminar this month. And you can switch it up the next month. It could just be, or it could be people that love talking about, video games or IT related, technologies, or, you name it. It could even be a book club, for God's sakes. It doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, getting out and building a network is a critical function of professional development. And I think too often people think of it as ripping off a Band-Aid, or something they do only if they have to, or they only do when times are bad. And, I'm not trying to get ahead of myself and go beyond what you're asking in the question, but, I think it's an important thing to add in here that no matter what it is, you stick with it in some capacity, even if it's that one group. I mean, I'm kind of contradicting myself because I dissolved that group, but I've been networking at various different events. There's not a month that goes by that I'm not at some networking event related to something that I'm interested in.
No, I totally agree. And thanks for all those amazing shares, because I'm sure people are connecting the dots of how they can apply that to their life. Just one simple shift in professional networking can literally shift your entire career experience, your net worth, your network to the next level. So I think that was great. Those are great nuggets. Definitely. Now, which skills contribute to maximizing your networking efforts? Because I'm really big through the Skills Recharge series right now, encouraging different professionals to focus on their non-automated skills. So I love that you mentioned public speaking.
I don't like to boast about companies or events or activities that often. I promote it if I like it, right? Mm-hmm. And so this isn't a name drop, but I'm meant to say, if you are having in insecurities, one of the best groups to look at, it's been around, it's probably one of the oldest formalized networking group out there. It's called Toastmasters. And Toastmasters helps you build what are the necessary communication skills that will apply throughout your life. And I know a number of friends and folks that have had success stories through that, because they teach you how to speak for 30 seconds. They teach you how to come up with a topic that you're interested in, how to engage an audience, how to build relationships among the group. And there's no professional designation attached to it. You can join Toastmasters as a 10th grade sophomore in high school that just wants to go and better themselves and be in there. And it's fun. And so there's no business requirement related to it. So, the key functions, there's not a single job out there that doesn't require some form of strong communication skills. I mean, obviously, your definition of strong could be different than mine, right? But whether it's talking on a phone, communicating through an email, communicating through a text message, there's very few jobs that don't require you to communicate in some capacity, even to your teammate, your boss, and those around you, right? So inevitably, you're building that skill every time you go out and meet others. It's making it easier for you to interact in the workplace. And the things that aren't ever going to be automated, believe it or not, are some of the simplest things, like AI and artificial intelligence has not been able to solve the common sense curve, if you will, if you want to call it a curve. But, one of the biggest things that AI lacks is common sense. So common sense can't be taught, right? It's something that you kind of just inherently know. And believe it or not, there are some folks that just have a low intelligence in the area, right? And so that's something that, for me, now being 20 years into my career, everyone says, if I had known then what I know now, man, imagine the things that I could have done. Well, one of those things is very simple. It's based on experience, and you've gotten yourself out there. You failed, you fall on your face, you put it out there, but you probably worked yourself through some things. So if I'm trying to fast forward that for others, I don't know if that's exactly your question, but, to me, it's, you have to get out and communicate with others and develop relationships. To me, the quality of your life is dependent upon the quality of your relationships. Let's forget about professional development altogether, right? You put human beings in solitude and a lot of issues arise. So we are social beings, right? And think about being cut off from your family and friends, right? Like, you may get comfortable in your own little clique, which is just your immediate family and a couple close friends, but I doubt you would even have friends if you weren't out communicating, right? So it doesn't have to be enormous, but you want to build that, because I think that's the one thing that people can't take away that's uniquely you. It's how you express yourself through thought and language, how you carry yourself through the various different ways of communication, or from how you present to how you talk to what you wear, to the way you handle things, how friendly you are, the way your personality engages on a certain situation. And it's easy to take those things for granted. So, if you've lived a very sheltered life and went to public school, or went to a private school, went to a small school, or schooled at home and didn't go away to college, I mean, we all have different opportunities, right? And you didn't really expand your network, and you were in the same hometown the whole time. All the more reason you need to get out and see the world and see how other people behave and communicate, because there's a massive amount of diversity in our own towns, let alone our own world, right? And then how we interact still, to me, you cannot beat face to face. So, one of the dangers and harms generationally is we're seeing, too much of that happening just over social and just over text message, and people having email conversations when they're 3 cubicles over in an office that goes on for days when they should just have a meeting face to face, for example, right?
Oh,
so,
yes.
That's another topic in and of itself. But, for me, it's the soft skills that we're all looking for when we're interviewing or we're building a relationship of any kind, let alone it's boss, employee or coworker. 80% of the job function, I would argue, is what that individual person brings to the table, and there's certain innate skills that may be uniquely theirs, right?
Mm-hmm. Indeed. What are key factors that you encourage the listeners to remember when cultivating short-term and long-term networking connections?
I think the first thing is you need to make sure that you just start a habit of doing it, right? Getting out and making a point. I do this pretty much on a monthly basis as I look ahead in the various networks or areas that I live in and I'm at, and I try to, pick 2 or 3 or 4. I don't always make them all, but pick 2 or 3 or 4 per month, that makes sense. And given whatever your circumstances are, you might have family, you might be in a certain point in your career. The sooner you start and the more you make this a habit, even if it's quarterly at first, right? But come up with some form where you're going to commit that, hey, once a quarter, I'm going to make sure I get out to a networking event of some sort. To me, it doesn't have to even be related to a professional designation. You can also do a volunteer situation. You can get out for like a Habitat for Humanity or whatever it is. Get out for something that puts you out in front of strangers into the community. And to me, think of that as an ongoing, professional development standpoint. The long-term outcome of it, you can't really even summarize. It's unbelievable, right? I have gotten some of my biggest opportunities through some of the strangest relationships. So sometimes people are like, hey, I'm really looking to get this key career and I want to build this opportunity, or I really want to get this whale of a sale. And, I tell the story a lot. I got 2 of my largest customers. One was through a hairdresser, and another one was through and another one was through a chiropractor, right? And so just someone that you got to know and got to know you got to know them, and I used their services for many years. And, when the timing came right, I consider going to a chiropractor for my health. I turn that into a networking relationship. It's a professional relationship. So I think the idea of 9 to 5, I clock in and this is the person I am, and then I go home and I'm that person is almost non-existent. It's been non-existent for me for over a decade, right? People tend to equate who they are with what they do, right? And so I think I'm getting a little esoteric or too philosophical about this, but I can't emphasize it enough that there should be a habit of relationship building for social and professional means, on an ongoing and somewhat regular basis, because, we tend to flourish through our relationships. And to me, it's so easy to call upon. The next thing is when you're running through a process, think about how you buy things or make decisions in your household about things. We don't like to just, for me, I like to buy things through people. Or, even if it's a book, you ask your friends, have you read any good books lately, right? Well, you got to have a good group of friends to recommend a good, book, right? You can read reviews, right? That's saved it to a degree. This is a very simple example, but I mean, everything from buying my house to getting the mortgage to handling my taxes to the car I drive to why I drive it, to what I bought, to the woman I'm married to, and to the friends that I keep have all come through the professional development skills that I've enlisted simply through being focused on networking as a part of my annual, let's call it my annual personal development plan, right? And the last thing I want to tie in with that's critical is the word congruent, right? You want to have congruency because, like I said, you're not 9 to 5 checking in and you're this employee and then that goes away and then you're this person at home and then you're this person with your friends. You're still you, right? So the idea of congruency, you want to have your social media profiles and social media standing, if you will, from LinkedIn. And, that's the one I absolutely recommend for everybody, whether or not you use, Facebook and Twitter and some of the other ones. There's a whole host of them out there. I use about 5 myself, but if you have any interest in developing yourself professionally, LinkedIn is where the party is, right? It's where the professional folks hang out, and still 80% of hiring is taking place using that site. Because the first thing people do when they get on a conversation with someone they haven't met is they look them up on the internet, right? True. And so who you are networking, right, who you are online and who you are in your personal life should be congruent, right? And so when someone sees all that together, then you have a way to track your activity and build it together into, let's just call it your personal professional development plan, right? So by cultivating and keeping those relationships active on LinkedIn and going out and socializing and adding to it, I mean, that is the role of being a headhunter or recruiter. That's like essential part of the job function. I tell you, though, I recommend it to people that have no interest in doing what I do, just for the sake of it will help them on their career, because then they can get mentors that way. They can get career advice that way. And I mean, I don't want to turn it back over to you necessarily, but you're one of those people that has, reformulated her career through, networking and building relationships. And I don't think you would have been able to do that if you weren't outgoing and social and building the relationships that you have over the course of your career.
Oh, thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. You just realize you have to be a continuous student in a different way. Like I know people know, I need to learn, I need to study. I have to keep, making sure their certifications are up to date. But there's just a lot of personal work that goes into professional development too.
Absolutely. I mean, the other thing is that you don't have to have it all figured out. You can't figure it all out yourself, right? The one thing I wanted to add, because we talked about the couple of recessions that I've been through and changing in times, and the one thing I think is really critical and important and why you make a habit of something is, today's results don't typically, provide results today or today's efforts, right? Mm-hmm. So if I go out and network with a bunch of people, it's unlikely that anything is going to come of it right away. The reason why that's critical is, let's just say the economy crashes again, because we're in the longest bull market in the history, right? So what goes up must come down. Perpetual growth of our economy and perpetual growth of business is impossible. It may be having a slow growth curve over time, but anyway, the whole point is it will come down at some point, and then it will be challenging. And so when things are challenging and you're like, oh my God, you find yourself without a job, and you're starting then to build those relationships, it is too late. It's going to take way too much time. Besides the fact, let's just call the top employer around who's out networking, let's call him Mr. Big or Mrs. Big. And if you're out networking and you're putting your resume in their face for the first time and they don't know you, along with 10 other people when times are bad, then you're just part of the noise. You're not even going to you say, hey, Tim and others told me to network and, it hasn't really worked out for me. I'm like, well, little did you know is that, Tim or people like me that have been networking, or like you, Michelle, that have been networking for years, as soon as they see things getting bad and they're going on, they tapped on, Mr. Big Shoulders said, hey, can you help me? And then he or she might have referred you to the next opportunity before, the entire school of fish, jumped on board, right? So it's a lot easier to help one person first than it is to help like a dozen all at once when they're asking for it. And you're more likely to go try to help someone you've known for years, you've cultivated a relationship with, than someone that's just trying to build one out of thin air with their own selfish intentions in mind. And that brings me to another point I wanted to make sure we put in there. When you're out there networking and such, the important part about it is, use social graces. The whole thing is you want to go out there and genuinely meet people and be interested in who they are and what they're doing. I have a natural sense of curiosity that even though I am a talker and like to share what I do, and I'm a pretty transparent person, and that comes naturally to me, it doesn't mean that when I go out and meet folks that I'm just in your face talking the whole time. I'm actually asking a lot of questions because I'm genuinely curious and interested about people, or interested about a number of different topics. I consider it a lifetime learning and part of my liberal arts education where it's never changed even since I was 5 or 7 years old, my first memories, right? So that's critical. The joke that's always made is you don't want to be Nancy Networker that sells mortgages and she pops around every networking event in time and sticks her card in your face and says, you need a mortgage, you need a mortgage, you need a mortgage, you need a mortgage. And, that person's, I would argue, not very effective, right? And oftentimes it's good to meet folks that have interest and you're meeting them just under normal circumstances where you get to be yourself. And then later on, you can tap into that network for whatever it is you need. I know stories of folks that were like, you know what? I've had best friends growing up, but some of the best friends I've met were through business. And I asked my business partner, who I only met 2 years ago, to be my best man and not my childhood best friend, because that best man and I clicked in such a way. And you know what I mean? So you just never know. I mean, I've heard of people having their clients be the godparent to their children because they've built such a strong relationship through business that it was, more connected than anyone they'd ever met in their life before, because they've gone out and met under genuine circumstances. So just things to keep in mind that as we grow and change, we change, right? And so the folks that we've known over time may not be, the best folks for us in terms of professional, contacts or even the ones that can help open the right doors. So that's why it's all the more important to diversify, who you're going out and meeting and talking to and under what topics and circumstances. So, I mean, that might be a loaded response. And, like I said, if you let me go, the tape will run out. There is such a thing. Maybe I'm dating myself. Yeah. This is digital. I could talk for 10 years and it'll still be saved on a hard drive somewhere, right?
It will be saved. It will be saved. Now, Tim, please share how the listeners can get in touch with you.
Easiest way is to just look me up on LinkedIn. Yeah, I think that's my favorite way. I'm on it a lot. It's Tim Lesnick is my last name, Lesnick. You can see it here on the podcast. Shoot me a note on LinkedIn. Tell me what you thought. If you want any individual advice, career, professional or otherwise, my door is always open. So, I technically have my own business now. And like I said, I'll retire doing this. Even the short times that I've been unemployed over the last 17 years, which have been only a couple months, maybe a couple weeks and counting. But, during those times, I was still doing and behaving the same way I would as a headhunter or recruiter after all these years. So, shoot me a note on LinkedIn and I'd be happy to connect.
Awesome. And you can find me hanging out on Instagram at Career Tipper, or you can email me at coach@careertipper.com and share how this episode has helped you with mastering your professional networking strategy. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Career Tipper podcast. We're grateful for our listeners. For more resources about how to keep your skills recharged, visit careertipper.com. Follow Michelle on Instagram and Facebook at Career Tipper and on Twitter at Career Tipper 1. Until next time, stay curious.